Good morning and welcome to a brand new week here on Breakfast Central. We're broadcasting live from our studios in Lagos, Nigeria, from wherever you're watching. Thank you, and remember that you can continue joining us via social media at News Central TV on all social media platforms. I am Olive Emodi. Thank you very much for joining us.
And I am Usaogi Ogma. Welcome to another Monday morning here on Breakfast Central for the next 2 hours, as always. We bring you some of the biggest conversations happening here in Nigeria, and we encourage you to be a part of the conversation by simply maybe tweeting at News Central TV. Let us know your thoughts on these major conversations. The phone lines will be open at some point, so you could also join the program this morning and share your views with us. It was a very interesting weekend as we get into the end of the month of November, and of course officially into the Christmas month. But many things happened over the weekend. As always, we share our top stories from the weekend, and going to be starting with the press release by the Dangote refinery. Of course, letting Nigerians know that they will be reducing the price of petrol from 990 naira to 970 naira. So 20 naira, a whole whooping 20 naira reduction in the price of petrol.
That's massive.
Yes, it sounded like Egungun, or what's his name? So yes, 20 naira reduction. And of course, the press release also said that they are doing it as a way of appreciating Nigerians for their unwavering support since the Dangote refinery project started and eventually, of course, went into full production. And, of course, many Nigerians in reaction to that, definitely did question the 20 naira reduction. Many people, of course, said that it was not enough. But as we've always said, what Nigerians still lack is clarity as to how Dangote Refinery has come up with its figures. What exactly has led to the cost of production of petrol and eventually sale of petrol being 970 naira per liter. Initially, of course, before the emergence of the Dangote refinery, if you remember, that many people had put together figures that were the official landing cost of petrol in Nigeria. When the subsidy conversation was very, very heated in Nigeria to defend the argument that Nigeria was still paying subsidy, and of course, had postulated that the price of petrol should be about 900 to 1,000 naira. But since the end of subsidy payment and the emergence of the Dangote refinery, the idea was that the price of petrol would drop significantly because many factors that led to it being that amount, were going to be taken out. The haulage prices, then whatever cost, that were added to it to bring the petrol into Nigeria, all of that taken out. But it doesn't seem like much has changed. And so many Nigerians, still pretty much, unimpressed with this reduction to 970 naira, because if you look across the country, I don't expect that any petrol station that has been selling for 1,100 or 1,120 or 1,150 is going to remove 20 naira.
I think the price difference that would really impress Nigerians is when we get to the point where we can say we're buying petrol below 1,000 naira, which I don't know if it's ever going to occur anymore. But at this point, I think Nigerians have just accepted their fate, that petrol has come to over 1,000 naira and that the price has come to stay.
Very true.
But now let's move away from Dangote to give you update with Helen Ukpabio, the pastor of Liberty Church in Akwa Ibom. Now she turned 60, and someone with the Twitter handle, the X handle, One Jobless Boy, wished her a happy birthday. Said Pastor Helen Ukpabio turns 60 today. And in response to that, another handle with another Twitter handle, an X handle, Bloody Civilian, says she literally made people burn their children alive. And then in response to that, her daughter says, I give you the next 5 hours to take this down or I will educate you in court. And in response to that, Bloody Civilian says, use your connections to remove her UK ban. She needs you, please. And this has started a conversation. Now, Bloody Civilian is not the first person to make the allegations. There's also been a documentary that's been done in that regard that has talked about the role that she's played in furthering the stereotype against children who are quote-unquote witches. I'm sure that you saw the documentary as well. And if you remember growing up, there was a narrative, a certain mindset and a certain narrative that many people had about things like, you remember Puff, Puff. I don't know if you never saw that?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay, but we all had these things where you imagine that if they gave you something to eat, they automatically initiate you at night, and there was just a lot of fear and secrecy, shrouded around all, the conversation about witches and witchcrafts. But witchcraft conversations did not start today. Killing of witches did not start today. It's something that, has started way, way before now. And, it's been something that, unfortunately, her daughter has said that she's had to live with this scandal and, this slander in this regard.
So, you've given a background as to how this started. Bloody Civilian is a recording artist here in Nigeria. She's one of the few female artists that we have. She's pretty, pretty popular. So when she made that statement in reaction to the Helen Ukpabio birthday message, it did go viral. But the crux of the conversation really is many people in reaction to it, and of course in reaction to Helen Ukpabio's daughter's, counter tweet, basically reminding us that we grew up in an era in the 90s, late 90s, where some of these church leaders and their teachings led to the harming of children back then. And some of the things that Helen Ukpabio allegedly used to preach about led to, mothers and fathers and, families back then. I remember some of the things that I saw that she used to preach about, saying if a child cries at night at 2 a.m., or if a child is very stubborn, or if a child is very, just random things that you'd expect from children, that child is a witch. And so it led to, in the late 90s, families then demonizing these young children. I don't know if there's any report of anybody burning their child, alive or anything like that, but, maybe there is.
I mean, they were, according to the reports that we saw online,
yes.
I don't know about the burning, but the one I know was, people kicking children out of the house, a number of children being left stranded and vulnerable.
And it was, it is blamed on a lot of the teachings that, persons or church leaders like Helen Ukpabio had back then in the 90s. And so there's been a lot of bad blood that has been brewing since that time, that at some point people hoped that there would be some, she would be made to answer for some of her teachings, and what it, led to in the late 90s. If you remember Reverend King in the early 2000s, I believe, or even late 2000s, he also went, went viral. He was eventually, found guilty and sentenced to prison for atrocities that he committed in church. The abuse that he was committing as a church leader. So, it was pretty much in the same, conversation, but mostly about the demonizing of children, caused by the teachings of persons like Helen Ukpabio, mostly Helen Ukpabio, from that's, what the conversation was about. And till date, there are still people that say that in Calabar, in Cross River State, that there are still traces of that level of abuse and the demonization of young children because of those teachings. And it hasn't gone away. You still see children being called witches. And, if this was Salem in the early days, we'll probably, understand where we are. But we're in 2024, and we still hear of this. I even saw a video yesterday of a woman who was accused of being a witch. Some of the videos that I see on X, and I just skipped. But I did, watch for a few seconds. She was so accused of being a witch, and she was burnt alive. So, and that's the society that we live in. And I hope that the conversation that we're having would eventually extend to also hold into account parents who took the laws into their hands and brutalized children, members of society who took the laws into their hands and brutalized individuals in society under the claim or the accusation of witchcraft. Right. So it should go across board.
So I'm going to play a bit of devil's advocate here, and the devil's advocate I'm playing would be to ask that, do we also genuinely believe that people no longer believe that there are witches?
No.
So that's one. Two, but now this time I'm shifting away from being devil's advocate to say that a number of these teachings were teachings done out of misinformation. People didn't have adequate information. For example, now we're in 2024, we're understanding that a number of the children that are throwing tantrums is not because they want to throw tantrums. Some of them are on the autistic spectrum. Some of them are children living with autism. some of them are just children, and children will be children, right? The problem then is the unfortunate reality that there have been scenarios where people, especially house helps, domestic helps, those people who would burn and scar them because they think, oh, this domestic help is a witch and all the things like that. And I'm hoping that, I mean, we've seen a number of preachers who, even in certain denominations, back in the day, they didn't used to watch television. There were certain things that were sort of seen or outlawed, but they've come back to address them.
Yep.
So I'm hoping that there will be situations where, in some cases, we will see a change in some of these, you know, conversations.
The core, you know, issue here, I mean, there's definitely, you know, lack of education. There's ignorance with regards to handling children and, you know, many other aspects of society. But the main meat of this conversation was that Helen Ukpabio's teachings, you know, as a church leader back then, led to a rise in the attacks, you know, against children, and of course the parents calling their children witches because of what she was teaching back then. And that's really what, you know, these persons are saying.
At the end of the day,
should,
the matter is in court, and I guess the court will be the one who will decide.
We'll see.
But let's move away from there to Davido. Davido faces backlash over comments on Nigeria's economic crisis. It was on a podcast, and when asked about, you know, people who are looking to return back to Nigeria, you know, there was a subtle, maybe overt warning to Black Americans, you know, to say that there's nothing to run back home. The economy is, you know, really struggling. And that has generated a fury of reactions. We saw the tweet by Joe Iwokwe, who said he felt bad that his in-law, Davido, would say something like that, knowing that he's a representative. Yeah, that's the tweet there. He said, my in-law Davido has made me sad by telling the world in America that Nigeria's economy is in shambles. This is very sad. I'll advise him to retract the statement ASAP. Nigeria made Davido QED. So, again, when questions like, or conversations like this come up, my first answer, or my first question is it the truth? If you say that somebody has defamed you, for example, if you're going to speak about defamation, the defense to defamation is truth. Has Davido spoken the truth or not? You know, did he go and say something that Nigerians don't know? It's almost a situation of, I know this thing is bad, but I don't want you to have to admit that it's bad. So when they ask you if it's bad, go around in circles, cover it up. And don't say what the truth is. The same way they came for, what's her name? The other lady, I can't remember her name now, who said what she said. In the same way, the chairman of Arawa, you know, Arawa ACF, you know,
Forum.
Consultative Forum, thank you very much, has been suspended because he said that in 2027 they will get another chairman who will be able to, quote unquote, stand against the current president. They have a right to. It's a democracy. Nigeria does not belong to anybody. Anyone who wants to run should run. Anyone has a right to throw their support behind whoever they want. So, did he say the truth? Yes, he did say the truth. Maybe one thing that not public service holders, celebrities and public figures will now have to be wary of is maybe trying to be a bit diplomatic to say, you know, now it's not really the best time. Maybe the wording would have been different, but he didn't lie.
I mean, nobody should expect a certain type of speech from him. It is not, you know, up to him. I mean, he, as an artist, I think that the main issue here is that these persons, Joey Bokwe and, you know, others, feel like he's demarketing Nigeria. But of course, you know, we remember that we had a president who went abroad, you know, and described Nigerian youths as lazy. You know, between, I think, 20, I'm not sure what years, but former President Muhammadu Buhari, he described Nigerian youths as lazy. And some of these persons, you know, agree with him. They took sides with him and said there's nothing wrong with what the president said. The question here really is about, you know, what you should, or how you should market Nigeria as a celebrity and as, you know, Davido, is the fact that, you know, Nigerians and Nigeria gave Davido the fame that he has, even if, of course, he came through his own hard work as well. Is that enough for him to then always tell a story that he doesn't believe in, you know, as true about Nigeria? Should he always speak positive about Nigeria on the international market or international podcasts simply because, well, he needs to be grateful that Nigeria made him? No, absolutely not. You know, his voice is still very, very important. And if he feels, according to him, that Nigeria's economy is in shambles, it's left for him to say it the way he feels it. If anybody feels otherwise, they can all as well also go and say that they don't agree with Davido and they don't think that Nigeria's economy is in shambles. But you would not question him or silence him or try to make him speak in a way that he doesn't believe in, simply because, well, Nigeria made him or Nigeria, didn't make him. That's not the way that it works. If he, the son of a billionaire, someone who has absolutely no lack in his life financially, feels that Nigeria's economy is in shambles, then, I mean, how about those who aren't sons of billionaires, billionaires, who are going through the actual reality of Nigeria, every single day? How about, the everyday Nigerian? So he feels that way. If he decides that that's the way that he wants to describe Nigeria because that's what his reality is, then absolutely, you can go ahead and
so
do
to flip the conversation the other way again and quote unquote play devil's advocate, is just to wrap up by saying that we also, I mean, as much as we can for public figures and celebrities, and we know that it's not really been the best of times, but we hope for a better country, and we're hoping for a better economy, and we're hoping for things to shine again. So maybe it's time for them to probably explore the possibility of being a bit diplomatic with some of their answers and not just outrightly making it look like Nigeria is being thrown under the carpet, because it's such sensitive times for Nigerians right now. And yes, we know that we've been struggling, but I don't know that it's something that Nigerians want to feel like it's rubbed in the face of, countries outside, especially because we're looking for investments in the country. But then again, maybe we would ask our audience to let us know what they think.
Being diplomatic, well, I agree with the idea of being diplomatic with your statements, no doubt. But I don't think he's under any obligation, to speak, in a certain way concerning, his country. There's people who are the major marketers of Nigeria, and of course they reside in government, and the way that the government actually even treats its citizens, and the way the government, presents itself in the international community, that's their responsibility as a human being, as a citizen. If this is the way that he feels, I don't think he should be, made to, held under any obligation to always say that Nigeria is the best place in the world, if that's not what it is.
Well, somehow, whether we like it or not, we're all ambassadors of our country. We don't have any other place called home. But let us know what your thoughts are at News Central TV on X. Do you think that, public office holders and celebrities have a responsibility to convey a positive image about the country? You can tweet at us individually or tweet at News Central TV to let us know what your thoughts are. As we move on with the conversations this morning, let's share with you what our top stories this morning on Breakfast Central are. This morning on Breakfast Central, federal government restores River State revenue following court ruling. Is it Uhuru for River State? Well, time will tell. And Nigeria rated vulnerable in latest Africa Risk Index by SBM Intelligence. There are 6 categories, and we'll let you know what this means. Enugu government backs Simon Ekpa's arrest and pledges support to the Finnish government. I'll be assessing the impact of current economic reforms in Nigeria and what the projections are. Review the newspaper front pages this morning, all happening this morning on Breakfast Central.
Welcome to Breakfast Headlines. Now let's begin by telling you that the Auditor General of Nigeria has uncovered irregular payments totaling over 197 billion naira across multiple agencies, including the Rural Electrification Agency, Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC, NBT, and a subsidiary of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and also the Nigerian Security Printing and Minting Company. The findings from 2020 to 2021's annual report reveal violations of financial regulations, including payments for incomplete or non-existent contracts. NBET topped the list with 100 billion naira in irregular payments, while the Rural Electrification Agency accounted for 2.12 billion naira. Alleged, of course, missing funds, will continue to be investigated by the Auditor General. In a related development, President Bola Tinubu has been urged by the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project to order a probe into the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation in 2021 regarding allegations of 57 billion naira in public monies that are missing, diverted, or stolen. SERAP made the call in a statement on Sunday by its Deputy Director, Kolawole Oluwadari. And still on graft matters, President Bola Tinubu has been tasked to intensify efforts against corruption in the country. This was by a group in Abuja while commending the recent court judgment which threw away requests by some aggrieved states to scrap the nation's anti-graft agencies, urging the courts to declare the acts setting them up as illegal and unconstitutional. The group says that an onslaught against corruption in the country will free up resources held by corrupt individuals and enhance revenue generation in the country. And now to the petroleum sector. The Dangote petroleum refinery on Sunday announced a reduction in the price of the premium motor spirit, PMS, also known as petrol, to 970 naira per litre. The company's chief branding and communications officer, Anthony Chiejina, disclosed this in a statement. He said the decision is the refinery's way of appreciating Nigerians for their unwavering support in making the refinery a dream come true. Now to security matters. In Benue State, tragedy struck as fresh attacks claimed multiple lives in the Logo local government area. At least 13 people have been killed in Azege settlement, Mbaya, Tombo ward, following an early morning assault on Sunday. The attack, allegedly carried out by suspected headsmen, began around 7 a.m. local time and involved widespread destruction, including arson and the razing of farmlands. Former caretaker chairman of Logo local government area, Benjamin Uzenda, confirmed the attack, describing it as coordinated and brutal. And that's all on Breakfast Headlines. Let's move back now to Breakfast Central and get into our top stories. I am Osaogie Ogbola.
Welcome back. Nearly 16 months after President Bola Tinubu assumed office as Nigeria's president, the economic reforms he initiated have been impacting the lives and well-being of many citizens and businesses. In this report, News Central Television evaluates the effects of these policies and government reforms since taking office. Our correspondent, Idong Joseph, provides more information on this.
Since taking office on May 29, 2023, President Bola Tinubu has introduced a series of economic policies aimed at reforming Nigeria's economy for sustainable growth and development. Among the most notable of these policies are the removal of subsidy on petrol, which he announced at his inauguration, and the unification of the nation's exchange rate regime. Now, almost a year and a half after these policies were implemented, many Nigerians say they have made life more difficult for citizens due to a rising cost of living and a decrease in their disposable income.
Rice was over 30,000, about 30,000 at the time. Now rice, I went to the market yesterday, I bought a bag of rice for 100,000. Where? How? With sadness, I returned home as if somebody has beaten me.
Before, we normally sell the least tire, 3,000 naira. But now, the least tire is sold at the rate of 12,000 naira. Those importers in the market, they normally give us goods on credit when the price was a little bit good down. But now, we can't buy goods on credit.
While it is true that Nigerians from all walks of life are feeling the impact of government economic reforms, the president and his economic team have acknowledged the current situation on ground. They, however, say many citizens are beginning to see the positive effects of these reforms, as noted by the International Monetary Fund.
They're very strong reforms, very difficult to implement and sustain, and the IMF is so pleased that we've been able to sustain it, and especially because they're beginning now to see that the reforms are effective and that the benefits are now beginning to be felt by Nigerians.
The IMF commendation highlighted by the Minister of State for Finance has received a stern backlash from the public.
Nigeria is the only OPEC country up until this moment that don't have refinery. They are not refining any oil, but they have the crude. And so, what are we talking about? So when you say Nigerians are beginning to understand, when you cannot buy things in the market, anybody that goes to the market now comes home with sadness.
Our economic policy have failed. So government needs to come and acknowledge that, yes, they have been misled by IMF. There's no country that's ever followed the teaching on the doctrine of IMF that did not regret it. So the IMF coming to mock the Tinubu government should be a wake-up call to the government that, oh, we have been misled by these people.
Given that the current situation is not peculiar to Nigeria, it is hoped that the government will act swiftly to address these challenges and improve the lives of citizens. In Abuja for News Central, I am Idong Joseph.
Now, still looking at Nigeria's economy, the stability of Nigeria has declined over the past year and is now in a vulnerable state, according to the latest Africa Country Instability Risk Index, ACIRI, released by SBM Intelligence. The country dropped to 45th position out of 48 sub-Saharan nations, a decline from 39th place last year, where it was rated stable. The Africa Country Instability Risk Index evaluates political, economic, and social stability based on factors like ethnic tensions, coup history, food security, and economic resilience.
Now, SBM Intelligence attributed Nigeria's decline to government policies that weakened the naira, high inflation, and rising operational costs, which forced several multinational companies, including GlaxoSmithKline and Procter & Gamble, to exit the Nigerian market. The report highlights Southern Africa as the most stable region, while Central Africa ranked as the least stable due to ongoing conflicts and economic challenges. Now, despite Nigeria's downturn, countries like Angola and Madagascar recorded significant improvements due to better governance and economic reforms.
Joining us now is Global Affairs Analyst Collins Nweke. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Very good morning to you, Olive.
All right. First of all, I think to get your thoughts regarding the rating by SBM Intelligence, if you look at the category, there are 6 categories. So there's the safe, stable, vulnerable, warning, critical, and red watch. These are the levels, the 6 levels that countries are categorized into. Last year, we were stable. This year, we're vulnerable. And hopefully, we don't get into warning next year. Do you agree with the current ratings?
I think there's a mix-up there, Olive, because last year, that is the inaugural rating, Nigeria was actually rated as a warning. That was in October 2023. And now they have deteriorated to, vulnerable. What is left is for Nigeria to now, escalate to the danger point. I mean, that is no, the next stage they will go. Hopefully, that will not happen. Now, in the summary that you have given in terms of the indices that are being used, there is a very clear correlation between economic development and security. Now, what you see, for instance, in the Southern African region that is rated as the most stable in Africa, you will see that there is a low propensity for security, in terms of insecurity. So the country is secured, and so stability is there, and that then trickles down to economic development. Central African region, which is the least, you also note that there is very high propensity for insecurity. Now in Nigeria, we are dealing with a combination of factors. Insecurity is there, but also policy, very clear policy, misalignment. Now, when you speak with government, like we have heard the Minister of State, talk over there, they will tell you that, it will get worse before it gets better. But you see, the point is that as long as Nigeria continues to be in denial that the policies that have been churned out in the last 12 months, okay, let's say in the last 15 months since Bola Tinubu came to power, that they have not worked. They are not in the best interest of Nigeria. Now, if you believe very much as a government in those policies and the fact that ultimately they will provide, prosperity for Nigerians, well, you do have to find ways of shoring up the sufferings that Nigerians are going through now. You don't do that just by palliative, because we haven't seen anywhere in the world where palliatives help to bring down inflation. No, it doesn't work that way. Rwanda experienced, the same issue. Colombia, that's another example. So there are a few places where Nigeria can borrow, live from, and then make a swift policy turnaround if they really care about the well-being of Nigerians.
I think you're correct when you say that last year Nigeria was rated as warning. And there's also an article on the 23rd of October that by the same SBM intelligence that says that Nigeria was rated safe. So I think there's a bit of a mix-up here that we hopefully will bring SBM intelligence to help clarify. But what do you think the picture is that the West has? And do you think that that image or that perspective that the West might have about where Nigeria is in terms of our ratings, how important is it?
It is of critical importance, Olive. The point being that those who want to disparage, IMF for being upbeat, they have to think twice, because essentially, the World Bank, IMF, and all of that, they kind of, see a need to help Nigeria in terms of boosting confidence and all of that. You see, but they are not talking to fools, entirely. They have, the Western countries, they all have their risks analysts everywhere, advising them on where to invest and where not to invest. Let's not get one point, mixed up anyway. It's not like foreign investors are all going to run away from Nigeria. No, there are still viable sectors of the economy where people will continue to invest in. But of course, in certain areas, they will not invest. And if there is anything that the government of Tinubu has done in the past year, it is actually doing very cogent efforts to see that the ease of doing business in Nigeria is improved, but also repatriation of funds back, to the countries of the investors. I think he has done some very significant work around that, and that continues to make Nigeria, attractive. But the challenges are humongous, especially when, such a rating as Asiri, is actually published. So Nigeria needs to work more on economic diplomacy, because that is very much needed now. But you see, there are just very many challenges, Oli, because you cannot work on economic, diplomacy when all the embassies in Nigeria worldwide are headed by acting heads of mission. There are no ambassadors. What kind of situation is that? Yet, you are, the mouth is full about, getting foreign direct investors to come to Nigeria. Who is going to drive it if your representatives are not out there in Nigeria? So there are very many things to address, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to highlight one of the things, if you look at the article, one of the things that it says is that a cutback on governance cost drove Angola's performance, while, of course, Madagascar's GDP growth improved to 4.4%. But I want to focus on the cutback on governance cost. Nigeria, I don't know how you would rate our performance, in that regard. The current president, spoke about the Oronsai report, and of course, they, claim to make certain moves to cut down on government expenditure, reducing the number of trips that, ministers and governors or the likes, can make, or their convoy and stuff like that. But how would you, rate, the Tinubu administration with regards cutting down on governance costs, with regard, in a bid to also improve on Nigeria's financial picture?
The entire cabinet of President Bola Tinubu needs to go back to school, or at least have a master class on what is called lean management principles. Because the cost of governance in Nigeria is prohibitively high. Higher, I believe, than any time in Nigeria's history. That is not good, because what it means is that the overhead is just unbearable. And some of these, borrowing that we hear about are actually used, to finance the huge, governance structure that Nigeria has. I mean, that has got to be revisited. Now, another area of critical importance is this, what I call politics of announcement. Yes, we have all heard of the Oransanya report and, the implementation team that was put together to actually, work on implementing, the report. Well, what has happened since then? Not very much. Not a single needle has moved. We also heard about, the size of, Nigeria's entourage when the president is traveling. I don't personally have any problems with, the numerous foreign trips because, yes, foreign partners need to see him. It is important that, they have one-on-one with him. I mean, the impact is huge, but it doesn't have to happen with a huge envoy. We heard about the fact that, ministers, are no longer allowed to travel indiscriminately, but it only created headlines. I mean, nothing has changed. So as far as cutting down in, the cost of governance is concerned, well, Nigeria still has a lot to do. And in my personal assessment, I believe that the cost of governance could be cut down by more than 40%. And that Nigeria will be better for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the cost, I mean, I think I saw Sunday Diary, I believe, over the weekend, sharing some of the policy changes that the current administration has made since they came into office, in different sectors. Hoping, that this would give some confidence to Nigerians to believe that they're on the right path. But that didn't seem to convince, the likes of Procter & Gamble and GlaxoSmithKline that we mentioned earlier, and many other companies that have since exited Nigeria, or at least cut down on the operations in Nigeria. Where do you think that, we failed to be able to, let these multinational companies to understand that the current administration is on the right path, and they simply just need to be a little bit patient, like the government keeps saying? Be patient a little while, and in the shortest possible time, the economy will stabilize and things will be better. Is it a failure of communication, or is it that these companies can clearly see that this doesn't seem to be going in the right direction and it's really just going to get worse?
Well, sorry again, the point is that 1 + 1 is 2 anywhere and everywhere in the world. I mean, no matter how you want to, spin and turn it, 1 + 1 will remain 2. Now, these countries, these multinationals that left Nigeria, they have been very, very patient. And the reason that they ultimately left, and the reason that more countries would leave if Nigeria doesn't make a turnaround in policy, is the fact that their decisions are data-based. Now, as long as Nigeria is unwilling or incapable of actually basing policies on data, let data drive the decisions that you make, drive the policies that you churn out, these multinationals will continue to live because, I mean, they use data to back up their decisions. So that's one aspect that Nigeria has got to do. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, if I were in government, I would probably do exactly what government operatives are currently doing, which is trying to reassure people, telling them to have some more patience. We're very close to the promised land and all of that. That is spin doctoring. But there is an extent to which you can spin doctor yourself as government out of the woes. You can't spin doctor somebody who bought rice a year or two ago for 30,000 naira, like the lady there mentioned, and then you go back to the market today and it's 100,000. For Christ's sake, we're looking at over 300% rise. and you are telling the person to have patience and your policies are going to, start having an effect. It just doesn't work that way. So I think the bottom line here, Osaroge, is that Nigeria has got to at least acknowledge that some of these, policies have had perhaps unintended consequences. Because, of course, I do not imagine that they've churned out these policies expecting that it will make life worse for Nigerians. No, they did them with the best of intentions. But it is also a very good intentional attitude to admit when you get it wrong and then retrace your step. That is what Nigeria should be doing right now.
So this year, our numbers are showing 45. Last year, we're 39. So that means we've lost, unfortunately, 6 points. And we're 25 points away from being under the red watch, because any country that gets to 70 and above is under the red watch. What are your projections for what the next 1 year would look like? And what are some of the moves that the government needs to take to ensure that we do not get up to that, we don't get worse, we don't lose more points, rather, that we don't gain more points, rather, we start to lose points within the next 1 year?
Yeah. Well, I believe that, I mentioned it in my intro, that Rwanda and Colombia actually offers, some very, very critical case studies of how countries can crawl out of vulnerability into, some level of stability. You will recall that in 1994, Rwanda, following again insecurity, major crisis, ethnic and otherwise, they were, in a very, very abysmal situation. A few things that they did was actually diversifying the economy. Of course, Nigeria will tell you that, yes, we are diversifying the economy, so that we move from consumption to production and all of that. But again, it falls under what I call announcement politics, because at the end of the day, what you ask yourself is, what impact have those policies had? They are not there. And a very clear example was also something that I referred to earlier. You can't be driving foreign direct investment when your embassies across the world are headless. No, they need to be headed by people who are trained, to do the job, to drive foreign direct investment, invest more in economic diplomacy. So Nigeria has got to do that. And then oil refineries. We have, when Dangote was on the pipeline, Nigerians exuded a lot of hope that, we will now begin to at least increase the capacity to produce, and then, things will get better. But, up until today, a lot of politics is still being played, with that. And then I believe also that there is a need to revisit the currency deregulation, because obviously the intended impact has not been achieved. Naira as a currency continues to lose value. The economists will tell you that there is a misalignment there. There is an extent to which people can wait for the impact of a policy to begin to yield a result. 15 months is just too much, and people are suffering, and you see, some are actually paying for all of these policy misalignment with their lives, because a lot of needless deaths are occurring in Nigeria, and it's time to call it a halt with better policies and turnaround.
Now, speaking of what the current reality is and how important our perception to the West and the other countries in the world is, recently, we started the show with a conversation this morning. Davido was criticized because of his response to a question when asked on the podcast about how, some Black Americans or some Africans in the diaspora are looking to come back to Nigeria because they're worried about the policies that the Trump administration might implement. And he said it's not cool back home, the economy is in shambles. How important, first of all, your thoughts on that, because it's generated a lot of criticism, some in support, some against him, saying that he's misrepresented the country and painted the country in bad light. So, first of all, do you agree that he's painted the country in such bad light? And how much weight does a statement about Nigeria's economy by celebrities, public figures, the likes of Davido, how much weight do they carry?
They carry enormous weight, such statements. The reason being that, they have very, very strong following. There are millions of Nigerians whom Davido will say, jump. They will not ask why. They will simply say, how high do you want me to jump? So their statements are taken as religion. And, they abide by it. And that is why it is important that they are listened to. Now, I don't know how far Davido has gone, but it might very well be that before he went public, he may have one way or the other advised the government in terms of, please, it's important to do A, B, C, D, and so on and so forth. That's, on that. Now, painting Nigeria in bad light, well, I don't know about that. I mean, like I said, 1 + 1 is 2 everywhere in the world. So there is also an extent to which you can spin doctor things, paint Nigeria positive and all of that. No, what you need to do about Nigeria is show an objective analysis about Nigeria. It shouldn't be doom, all the time, because there are quite a number of things going well for Nigeria. For people like me, my point is that there are quite a lot of things going well for Nigeria that could be used to trump those things that are going bad. If only those in power could be a little bit selfless, that if they could be a little bit more purposeful, I think all of those things will begin to happen. So people will always, draw their conclusions. But you see, we live in a global village now where information is available. So people will make their decision based on available information, including this Asiro report that we are talking about, including as well the statement by IMF, World Bank and the rest of them. So ultimately, they will make up their mind. Businesses will look to risks analysts to ask them, what is the best thing for me to do in investing in sector A, B, C, D. So while they will discourage them from investing in certain sectors, they will indeed encourage them to invest in certain sectors. So it's not all doom, but the truth have got to be told.
Yeah, absolutely, and I totally agree with that. In a month's time, when we're deep into the Christmas season, I'm sure Nigerians would also feel the brunt of its, current economic realities. Hopefully, the naira, also doesn't continue to depreciate. Collins Wake, thank you very much for your time this morning. And
thank you for your time.
We look forward to speaking with you again.
Always my pleasure. Thank you, Olive and Sorego, for having me.
Absolutely.
You said something. You said during the festive season, Nigerians will feel the impact. Well, Davido said, them go feel it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Okay. All right. Let's move to other conversations. This morning, we, of course, move to River State. The federal government has reinstated the River State's statutory allocations following an appeal court ruling that stayed an earlier federal high court order. The federal high court had halted payments in October, citing constitutional breaches after Governor Sim Fubara presented the state budget to a 5-member assembly faction deemed improperly constituted.
Following the governor's appeal, the Accountant General of the Federation confirmed the state would continue to receive allocations pending the final court decision. The ruling comes amidst ongoing disputes within the River State House of Assembly over legislative authority. We're joined now this morning by a stakeholder in River State, a policy development expert, and the founder of TAF Africa, Jake Epele. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Is it safe to say that everything is now Uhuru in River State? Are we starting, is this a welcome development? And just to get your general sense of, the updates regarding this, if it's something to be excited about, if it's something that you saw coming, and what this will mean for, the policies that have, and the politics in River State.
Thank you, Olive. Olive, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I think we should stop playing politics with people, especially with River State and River State indigents. I have been on the phone. I walked the phone throughout last night, trying to get a confirmation because I don't want to come on the national television and say what is not accurate, credible, and objective. River State have not received that money, and I think the Accountant General Office should stop playing politics with Rivers indigent. We have not received that. The government, I don't think the government have received, except they received it last night by 12 midnight. But as of today, I don't think that funds have hit their account. And I think this is one thing that we keep doing over and over again, trying to please a group of individuals that are self-centered and have selfish interest and doesn't mean well for their people except for themselves, you know. So I think this should stop. And going by the Constitution, going by the current appeal court judgment, that fund should be released to my state, who needs it badly. There are old men and women in the hospital that this financial constraint will impact. There are children in school that this financial constraint will impact. There are social services that this financial constraint will impact. And I think the earlier the executive arm separates herself from politicking, the better for the progress of this country.
Just to clarify, Mr. Epele, what you're saying is that the federal allocation has been disbursed and River State has not gotten a dime. Because from what we're seeing, the report we're having here is that a total sum of 1.411 trillion naira was on Wednesday shared by the 3 tiers of government and other stakeholders out of a gross revenue of 2.668 trillion naira available in the month of October 2024. And that they're saying that, you know, it was shared, the October federal revenue was shared among the 36 states, including River State. Are you clearly saying that River State hasn't gotten? And if yes, then who is telling the lie here?
Well, they are telling the lies, Olive. Olive, I can tell you authentically, I can bet the last drop of my blood that except that fund hit the account of Rivers Treasury by 12 midnight, as at this morning, as at now, going by what I know before 12 midnight, that funds have not been received by River State government. And we should stop playing politics with things like this.
I mean, tell us, you know, what the implication of this means. How has River State been able to run its affairs in this period when, you know, I mean, there's been the court order stopping allocations from getting to the state? You know, what does this also mean politically and also with regards governance in River State?
Well, the current government is very prudent and have sort of scaled up their resource mobilization. IGR that they claimed for years, and I mean the previous administration claimed for years, was under 15 billion, had gone to 21 billion and above. And so the state government, and I'm not speaking for them, I'm just telling you what I know as an analyst, and very unbiased analyst, whether anybody likes it or not. The government manages their resources well. They may not come out and be complaining openly, but of course, when you take that level of funding away from the state government, it will impact a lot of things. And that's my concern for this constituency of people that are so heartless, not knowing that their parents are involved, their cousins are involved, their sisters are involved. You know, if you tell me you have the interest of the people, you want to ensure that the social amenities that everyone enjoys as a citizen and of the state are important to you, then you cannot be advocating and strategizing to implement this devilish agenda. You know, so it's completely unacceptable, and I think the Accountant General Office should do the needful today by transmitting that funds to River State government that needs it badly. It impacts everything: social, economic, spiritual. It impacts everything in the state, and my state should not go through this at all for the interest of a group of people that are heartless, that I'm beginning to doubt whether they are indeed from River State.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, what the political implications, of this, are endless. But I mean, when do you see this ever ending? This turmoil in River State has started right from the, almost the moment Governor Sim Fubara was sworn in. And it seems like, rather, there's, something new emerging every week. It's either from the State House of Assembly, or it's from the courts, or it's from the local governments, but there's just something always going on. When do you think that this would eventually come to an end, for Governor Sim Fubara to be able to govern the state, or not? How do you see this eventually ending, and what would you recommend, at a time like this?
Well, I believe that this show of shame perpetrated by these faceless individuals can end when they truly and really decide to put it to an end. When the judiciary that have literally becoming a ridicule of a sort, when they will do the needful and interpret the law the way it should be interpreted, when shameless politicians would consider that they are elected by the people, that's if they're elected by the people to serve the people, when they understand the financial, the economic implication and the impact of this kind of shenanigans, the impact of it on the common people, people that cannot afford to send their children abroad, people that cannot afford to drive cars and fuel the cars and pay the driver by taxpayers' money, people that feel that they have stolen enough and they can use that money to create chaos and anarchy in the system, people whose ambition has skyrocketed, that they don't even know when they are sane or drunk. I think when all of this is put in perspective, we will get the answer. When there is correct interpretation of Section 102 that is very clear, that is being manipulated by some lawyers, judges, and politicians, when the clarity of that is put on the front burner, when the entire executive, Nigerian executive, when the presidency considers that River State is part of the entity that they are governed, that they govern, when all of that is put in perspective, then we will make progress and we will have this issue resolved once and for all.
All right. I mean, hopefully, if you can, because I really want to know if you also hold the governor accountable. Has he also erred in his handling of the, this political crisis? And, is he also to blame for where we are today?
Very good question. Very, very good question. Everybody has a blame. Everybody, including myself. All of us have done one thing or the other that led to where we are today. You can't exonerate the current governor. He's also part of the politicians, whatever agreement he had with his former boss, is also generating this. But I also want to say that I believe that Fubara had done his best in trying to resolve these issues. Unfortunately, the other camp is not yielding at all. They are bent on removing him, disrupting government governance, and satisfying their own selfish agenda. So generally, and you asked a very intelligent question, I will say that everybody has one blame or the other, including myself, who is also an indigenous of the state, and all the elders. We all have one share of blame or the other. If all of us can do what we should do to serve the people and serve them well, we will not get to where we are today. But this is not insurmountable, it's resolvable if we all can come together and face the elephant in the room and address it and put it to bed.
All right.
All right, Mr. Pele, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We certainly look forward to seeing some calm, and we'll be expecting to hear from the Office of the Accountant General, either some sort of a press release followed by payment, and when we do, we'll hopefully get you back if we do get some feedback in that regard. But thank you so much for your time with us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you. When they do, I will give them a thumbs up, but they should get themselves out of politicians and politics so that governance can reign.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Do have a wonderful day. And for us here in the studio, let's bring you a recap of the stories that we've looked at this morning and also take you through some of the stories coming up next. Federal government restores River State revenue following court ruling, and according to our guest, Jeke Pele, no payment has been made yet. And we're expecting an update from the Office of the Accountant General. Nigeria rated vulnerable in latest Africa Risk Index. We had Mr. Collins Nweke join us to explain what that means. And we also had a report assessing the impact of the current economic reforms. Now let's share with you what's coming up next.
Coming up next, Enugu State Government backs Simon Ekpa's arrest, pledges support to the Finnish government, and also the newspaper front pages. The major stories making headlines across Nigeria this morning would also be asking, which way Nigeria? Now let's take you through the newspapers this morning. The major stories making headlines across Nigeria this Monday morning. We are joined by political analyst Dotun Ojon. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Monday to you.
Same to
Happy
you.
Monday to you too.
It's good to be here.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, on the Punch newspapers this morning, where we start off, it says their reps may clash over Tinubu's $2.2 billion fresh loan on Tuesday. Loan is an extra burden on government, Nigerians, a minority caucus warns. We will approve loan and ensure it is not diverted, says deputy spokesman. Okay. Also this morning, upgrade. Discos may move 3 million subscribers to estimated billion.
Huh?
Presidency tackles Kuka for tagging Tinubu accidental leader. Interest rates hike likely again as MPC meets today. And of course, Jose Adeogun has once again gotten its facelift as it does every Utah season.
Maybe Cardi B will come this year.
Absolutely. Zenith Bank ushers in Utah with Lagos Street light up. I wish, every bank in Lagos would take one street, and just light up the whole city. Somewhere in Lekki needs a bank to please my streets.
You mean, is it your street?
Yes, I wouldn't mind.
Are you sure it's your street, or you're looking at like that a street that's where there's a particular store that has a farm name?
PDP governor's 24th state chairman plotting to keep Damagum, says reps. Police hunt Ogun woman for dumping child outside clinic. And also, Kayamo says Oyedepo's jet can't leave private airstrip without clearance. I'm not sure why that is coming up.
All right.
Tinubu may present budget this week, says the Senate. These are the big stories on the Punch.
Daily Independent says, at the top of the paper, Okpawolo raises 14-man panel to probe Obaseki on the front page of the Daily Independent. Dangote refinery cuts ex-depot price of PMS to 970 naira per litre for marketers. Experts warn of businesses in Nigeria collecting payments in dollars. It's like we start with the fashion brands. Task federal government to prevent dollar-dominating country's economy, worried foreign airlines violating BASA arrangements, and ask federal government to enforce CBN Act that criminalizes refusal of naira. SERM asks Tinubu to probe missing 57 billion naira in humanitarian affairs ministry. Tinubu, Buhari, others accidental leaders, says Bishop Kuka. Nigeria-Brazil pact to boost agric in 774 local government areas, attract $4.3 billion. We are committed to paying heritage banks uninsured deposits, says NDIC. Lagos government hails Supreme Court ruling on lottery regulation. And telcos rule loss of 70 million subscribers in 9 months, face bleak future in dilemma over NCC refusal to approve tariff hike. And that's all on the Daily Independent. Let's move to our final paper this morning.
The Daily Times coming up next. It says here, Wale Adun, Nigerian government saves $20 billion by ending fuel subsidies. Still, same government, of course, is looking out for a $2.2 billion loan. So, I mean, it's raising questions. If we've saved $20 billion, maybe it means that we have not spent $20 billion. Doesn't mean that we have $20 billion. And that's why the government still needs to go take a loan. Maybe, he should, explain further what he means by we save $20 billion while still, going out for loans. I won't yield to pressure from APC governors to dump PDP, says Adeleke. Bishop Kuka, how Tinubu, Buhari, Jonathan Obasanjo became presidents by accident. And also Clark to Tinubu, try Buhari and Malami for humiliating ex-CJN Walter Onoge. I'm going to start with the Punch newspapers this morning. I think I will probably just give, Dr. John freedom to pick any story that he wants to start with, whichever one tickles your fancy this morning to start with.
Okay, because I drive in Lagos traffic and I'm used to a lot of fights, see yellow buses and all of that. Maybe we should talk about the reps clashing with the presidency about...
so you imagine that it's going to be like Gidigbo.
Now, would you allow me to break this down so that everybody will understand? Number one is that when you make a budget, for example, at the beginning of the year, and there's a deficit in it, it's a way of communicating to the people that you will get that deficit by borrowing. So the borrowing that is happening in government is not new to any organ of government, either the executive, the legislature, or even the judiciary, because the budget we talk about is the destiny direction of any nation. So by January, for example, I tell you that this is how my nation will be by December. And I am having a budget of, let's say, 1 billion. And all I can get from my internal or sources is about 500 million. Once you give approval to that budget, knowing full well that I can only get about 500 million from the 1 billion, you have given an indirect approval for borrowing. So it is not a matter of what we want to fight over. It is the reality that people like us who have read the budget have known from the beginning of the year that when you have a budget of so amount of money and you do not have money to fund it, how do you want to fund it? You go borrow. So it shouldn't be new to the House of Reps member. But here is it. In leadership, there are two ways to economic freedom. You either take the staircase or you take the lift. Here is the problem. When you take a lift in a place where the power is epileptic, you can actually get stuck. So we can decide at the beginning of the year that, oh, do we want to take a lift or want to take the staircase? Whichever way, the focus is at the end of the day, this is what we want to achieve. When you agree that you want to take the staircase, you sit down and you arrange your budget in a way that you will not need either internal or external borrowing as much as that. That means that you want to take one step at a time. But when you agree that you are going to take the lift, then you create a portion for borrowing, which is what we have now. Now here is the fear. The fear now in Nigeria is that when you have a budget, usually the budget performance is usually between 50 and 70%. And that's why REP is warning now that, okay, even at the end of the day, so do not expect that there's going to be a fight tomorrow. Approval will happen tomorrow because they are aware. But at the end of the day, this is the worrying part of it. A Nigerian government or the executive arm can actually go get money, borrow it, and decide not to use it to execute the project that that money is meant for. So at the end of the day, you can hear that our budget performance is 70%. So there's not going to be any fight. It's a decision we have made, including you, because anybody that is living in a federal constituency in Nigeria is part of those people making that decision, because you have a representative in Abuja who is supposed to sit at the beginning of the year and say, oh, we are not going to approve this budget. Why? Because the deficit is too wide. But once you give approval to a budget that has a wide deficit, you have given indirect approval for borrowing. So what the president is doing now is acceptable within the context of the budget that he has prepared and presented to them. So nobody is going to come out to say,
so they're not really going to
fight.
clash?
No, there's not going to be any
Okay,
clash.
let's quickly hear from Michael calling from Lagos. Good morning, Michael. Thanks for calling. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
So I want to quickly talk about the issue with reverse state allocation. I don't know if my life discussed that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I don't understand what brand of democracy we are now practicing in this country since the advent of APC, because everything that represents democratic tenets has gone to zero level. All the things that the APC, when they were in the opposition, were criticizing the PDP then, they are doing most of it. Anybody that comes on air or anywhere speaking, justifying any actions that APC has taken so far, does not mean well for this country. So because that River State is in the opposition, and the former Governor Wike has sold the state vote to the present president, so the River State cannot run as a state and allow the governor to pilot the affairs of the state. Why withhold allocation of the state that produces majority and a sizable portion of the resources of this country? Is that how we are going to be continuing in this country? If the judiciary are pocketed by the APC and the presidency, there's just no hope for the common man again. And if all of us are silent, all these things, we see that the Nigeria is becoming a fair state where there's no more law and order. So whatever the president is doing, he should tell Wike to take his hand off the governance of River State. He has ruled the state for 8 years as a governor. Why continue to destabilize the state when he's now a minister of the FCT? If Tinubu pretended to be a pro-democrat, does not do anything about this River State, the people of River State may be forced to take the laws into their hands.
All right, Michael, thank you very much. I mean, interesting point is made there, but I want us to, talk further about the budget. On the Punch, it still says here, Tinubu may present budget this week. We don't have, a clear picture of budget implementation for 2024 yet. The Auditor General's office, if you remember in the news, has already stated that certain ministries, MDAs have a contract fraud, that have been uncovered, 197 billion naira contract fraud in the MDAs. And I've repeatedly argued that one of the things that we completely fail to recognize is that Nigeria loses a lot of money through leakages, in government. MDAs across the country, both on the federal and on the state level, have so many holes through which funds just, leak and are not used for the reasons that they, have been budgeted. But we don't seem to take the Auditor General's report, seriously every year. And it's not the first time that we're seeing this. In previous years, the Auditor General has indicted many, MDAs for, mismanaging billions and billions of naira, but nothing changes. Yeah. What are your expectations for the 2025 budget?
Okay,
there's, I think, about 10 trillion naira budget deficit that has been
So people who do not, especially people in government, when they do not understand the concept of budget, they think it has to be a year in, year out kind of ritual. Yeah. So that's why they call it a lifespan. Budget actually has a lifespan. And anything that has a lifespan can actually be extended. For example, if you sit down and you look at the realism of the budget execution in a particular year, you can decide to say, oh, I'm actually shifting this budget to cover up to June of next year for me to be able to fix all the things that needs to be fixed, to make the monies that needs to be made available, to make it available. But here is what we've done over the years. There's been a constant competition with ourselves. For instance, if we make 2023 budget 7 million, government thinks that the next budget has to be 10 million. No, it does not have to be 10 million. Once you continue to increase your budget like that, now you have created a legal avenue for people to steal money. What does that mean? If people have excess money that is budgeted for, it means that excess fraud will happen, which is what is happening. So my expectation is that the government will look critically into this one we are doing and have a way of extending it into 2025 so that reasonably we can have 80% to 90% performance of this budget before we'll be thinking of drafting a new one. And there's nothing stopping the government, instead of moving forward and creating a huge amount of deficit, we can actually move backwards. Move backwards to complement what we have done before. What do I mean? Instead of having a 10 trillion, we can do a 6 trillion budget. In that sense, people will not have access to steal more money. So I think these are some of the things. And you will remember that when this government came on board, the debt we had was only about 87 trillion naira. Now as is 136 trillion. That means that within this short period of time, the government has borrowed over 50 trillion naira.
Hold on. Mark, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead quickly.
Okay. Please, I would just like to make a contribution to the effect that when we are discussing certain issues that are sensitive in the country, some people come on television. The press has a big responsibility to do some investigation that will help check some people that come to do gaslighting on television. Please, I want to put a poster. Can you find out? Anytime the Federal Accounts Allocation Committee meets, the money is not disbursed immediately. As we speak now, how many states have received the money? Does it mean that once facts fit, the money is allocated immediately and disbursed immediately? So when you do that investigation, you'll be able to tell the guy who is coming to gaslight that it is not targeted at River State. No state has received the money because it takes a process for money to hit the accounts of the state after fact meeting.
Yeah.
If you have done that investigation, you will have checked the man that came to pay on the motion of this money. So River State is not targeted. No state has received the money because it takes a process after meeting before money hits the accounts of state. That is my contribution.
All right, thank you very much. He does make, I should mention that he does make a really good point.
Yeah, but
the way that Jake Ekpele painted it, you know, it sounded like every other state has received but River State.
That's why I asked. If you remember, I asked in the conversation, are we saying that every other state has received their allocation and River State hasn't received? Because according to the report, it's saying that, you know, I think it was on Wednesday that this allocation was, and this is a report that was done 2 days ago, meaning Wednesday last week.
Yes, so
when does October allocation get into the account? Because it's 25th of,
I think where the confusion lies, and I really wanted to talk about it when we're talking about budget, is the fact that there were contradictory statements from the ministry. Initially, the office had actually said, oh, they were going to abide by the earlier court this thing that stopped them from giving allocation. Then they came back because immediately the River State government actually appealed that. And I think we need to be very, very careful when we speak as if there's nothing good happening in Nigeria. We do know that people can do better, but it's a tradition across Africa that opposition is enmity. Until we continue to outgrow these same rivers, you know what former Governor Amechi, you know how PDP dealt with him when he was in APC. I don't know whether you remember all of this story, to the point that you remember CP Umbu and all of that, going here and there. I think our political leaders must continue to create impression that opposition is not enmity. And we must also be very, very careful, because this is the only country we've got. And all of us, we must be strategic and deliberate in speaking well of the country. That does not mean that we should not point people that are in power into areas where they can do better and areas where they are doing wrongly.
Speaking well about the country, maybe later I'll ask you your thoughts on the Davido statement, but I want to quickly take the story on the Daily Independent. Experts warn of businesses in Nigeria collecting payment in dollars. I don't think that anybody can pretend like they don't know that there are people that charge in dollars. There are businesses, even brands. In the fashion industry, for example, if you go on their website, you will see dollar payments, although a number of them will put dollar payments and then they'll put the naira equivalent, and the dollar would be for maybe their audience abroad. But we're seeing here that they've asked the federal government to enforce TBN Act that criminalizes refusal of naira. How important do you think this is?
Dollarizing your economy has never been the best, and we could point out there are some countries in Africa that when you look at them from, and I don't want to mention them because a lot of Nigerians will like to visit some of these countries. When you mention them, from outside of the country, you see, oh, everything is nice. But when you get into the economy and you open the book, you see that these are dollarized economy. It doesn't mean that they are doing better than Nigeria, but there's a difference between performance and perception. What they've been able to get right is the issue of perception. Dollarizing your economy is not always the best thing. And it's so annoying now when they get to a point where you have to pay in dollar. Some hotel can tell you that, oh, it's actually $50 per night, but this is the naira equivalent. I can confess to you that I've been in a situation where somebody wants to pay for house rent and the person demanded that it has to be in the greenback. So all of these things are happening. And in fairness, it's not the poor Nigerians that are making these things to happen. That's why most of the times when we have conversation, it seems as if we are always pointing upward. Where do I want to get dollars to pay for house rent, for instance? So I think we must not destroy this economy. The NSC is doing extremely well. We must continue to work on these gains and ensure that, number one, we do not dollarize our economy. Number two, we do not look at big industries alone, because we can take examples of countries that have moved from where we are to where they are today, and the input of small and medium-scale entrepreneurs. So these are some of the things we must continue to do. But government cannot actually shy away from the fact that they are aware that big players in the industry, in many of the industry, have actually dollarized our economy.
From the reports here, you will see that they are worried about foreign airlines violating the arrangements. And a lot of these airlines are just trying to protect themselves. Imagine an airline that when they came into Nigeria, they were transacting, and I'm just going to use numbers loosely, and saying that flight from Lagos to London was at the time, say, 700,000 naira. Now, when they do the exchange rates, it's not favorable for them anymore. So just to maybe cushion the effect of inflation, they would rather earn in dollars. I mean, there are many Nigerians that would rather earn in dollars.
Do you know why? Do you know why? One of the reasons why they say Nigeria is the giant of Africa, because we can say, oh, the economy is not working. And I'm going to do a very little mathematics. Across the world today, we have about 2,000 billionaires. From that number, 700 are from the US in terms of dollars, billionaires in terms of dollar. If you look at the number, I think 400 or 200 is from India. If you look at the number, those billionaires come out of heavily populated countries. And Nigeria is also a populated country. So as it were, we have many of our people traveling. We can use this as conversation. We can use this to form agreement with some of the, they will not come into our country and be determining what will happen to us. And that's why I want to specifically commend the aviation minister. He's been on the right path. And I think if he continues like this, Nigeria again will be respected in terms of the industry.
I don't know if we'll have time. There are two stories I would have loved for us to take. The Okweolu raising a 14-man panel to investigate Obaseki, and then telcos losing 70 million subscribers.
The saving $20 billion by ending fuel subsidies. That's also an important thing.
Let's quickly take this call as quickly as possible. Samson from Lagos, good morning. Thanks for calling. Please go ahead with your comment and make it brief, please. All right, seems that we've lost that. Okweolu raises 14-man panel to probe Obaseki, restores full statutory rights of Oba of Benin. The drama in Edo State has entered into another gear. What do you see this?
From the very beginning, I knew that there were few recklessness that happened during the last government, and it became very obvious when the governor was was actually fighting with the deputy, and the deputy was available to make some documents also available to people who might want to investigate. And in Nigeria today, it is either you understand politics of power. It is peculiar, because politics of power in Nigeria today carries a lot of things in it. The complexity is so wide. Number one, it carries traditionalism in it. It carries ethnicity in it. It carries religion in it. And your ability to be able to swim in this complex water determines at the end of the day whether you will be an acceptable kind of leader. For example, the person of the Oba of Benin, all of us outside of Benin actually revere that office. So it's like somebody coming to the Osun State government now, talking down on the Ife monarch, Oni of Ife. You know, a lot of people will frown at that. So I think Obaseki did not actually manage that complexity very well, and it's going to backfire. And I knew this will happen. I never knew, I was just praying for him that if his party had lost the election, that was before the election, that this man will be in a very big problem, taking us back to where we're coming from. When I mentioned to you the mindset of Obasanjo said in Africa that opposition is enmity. So he should be ready to face the fire. And of course, if he didn't do anything wrong, he will come out clean at the end of the day.
Wale Adun says Nigerian government saves $20 billion by ending fuel subsidies. Okay,
so subsidy only moved, and I think I made this point, subsidy only moved from government to people. So when government stops paying, people begin to pay. And if you save money at the end of the day, the proceed of the money saved must be to the benefit of the people. So we do not want to hear that, oh, you remember what happened in, is it Anambra, where Peter Obi was? And Peter Obi will come out and say, oh, I saved so billion naira. And we are looking back to see the man that came after him. What did he do with the money? Yeah. The impact is not on the people. So we do not want the federal government to also behave in that certain way of saying, oh, we've saved money because of a subsidy. For instance, if you saved money, there are critical areas, and forget about road. To take the burden off Nigeria today, our refineries have to work in full capacity. So if you save 20 billion, in my head, dollars, I am thinking that by now we should put the refineries to work. There are conversations about petrol that I need to quickly talk about. In 1992, when MKO Abiola was campaigning, there was this analogy. He said that the nation had the capacity to actually dispense petrol free of charge. Because in the crude that you see, it is not only petrol. We have about 15 other products that come out of it. Yeah. And when you look at this product, we have petrol, we have diesel, we have jet fuel, we have oil, we have LPG, we have other petrochemicals that you use to produce all of these things. By the time you put the money, you realize on all of these things. MKO Abiola had argued that that can actually take care of dispensing petrol free of charge. And there's nobody that has come out to say that MK Abiola was wrong. In fact, in the US, their EIA had come out to say that in every barrel of petrol that crude that you see, that you can actually get between 19 to 20 gallons of petrol. You can get between 10 and 11 gallons of diesel. You can get between 5 and 4 gallons of jet air. You can get 1 gallon of petrol. You can get between 1 and 2. All of these things are there. These are broader conversations that we should have. By the time you total this money together, it is actually possible to have petrol free of charge. So what I'm thinking about is that if we have saved money from subsidy, we should plow the money back to fixing our refinery so that they will actually, you read the Dangote story now, that's trying to bring it back to 977. But I think we do not deserve that price as it were today, because majority of us are still heavily reliant on petrol. So when we have that money, we shouldn't just keep it. We should use it in a way that it will either benefit our foreign exchange or benefit us directly by fixing our refinery.
I mean, as quickly as possible, 1 minute if possible. Telcos rule loss of 70 million subscribers in 9 months. Telcos have been asking the NCC to approve their tariff hike. That hasn't been approved. And their argument would be that the current realities don't support business continuing with telcos. But NCC, on the other hand, is protecting the rights of consumers. Consumers who also are feeling the heat in other areas. So what really is the future for, telcos in Nigeria?
I think they cannot continue like this. And we cannot create a very volatile economy and expect the situation to remain the same. We know from the very beginning that there's one thing that controls everything. In Nigeria today, whatever the direction the dollar is facing is the direction your inflation is facing. Is the direction the prices of product is facing, the prices of product are facing. When you know this reality, once you allow that to go north, just expect that everything will go that direction. So I pity them, and I also totally pity Nigerians. And I just hope that we will get to a point where all of these things will end and Nigerians will be able to make up. Then that will also set discipline into the way we communicate in Nigeria. It's going to get to a point where I will not have to ask you, hello, how's the family? I just go straight to the point. That's the reality of the economy.
All right, Dr. Ojon, thank you very much for your time this morning. I think these things will be x-rayed further, and I encourage everyone to take a closer look at the 2023, 2024, budget, and of course, as we go into 2025, and see the issues that may exist in those places. Thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure.
All right. Stay with us this morning. We have a bit more coming your way as we head to, of course, the 9 o'clock where we wrap up this morning. But, of course, one more top story. Good morning once again. The conversations about a 6-year term or single term for president and governors was rejected. The bill, rather, was rejected sometime last week by the House of Reps, and the PDP presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar, expressed his disappointment at the rejection. But for many others, Nigerians across the country, the actual reaction to the bill was simply, nobody asked for this. Nobody really looked through all the challenges plaguing Nigeria today and thought to themselves that changing term limits was a top priority. In fact, for many, it was more of a distraction. Nigerians are not waking up every morning thinking about the terms of the elected leaders. Term duration has never been the issue. In fact, the most popular reaction that you would hear from many people is that the single 6-year term will just be an opportunity to amass as much wealth as possible by these politicians. That was a popular opinion, because a very widely accepted reason that most people go into politics in Nigeria is to amass wealth and power. And so most people just immediately said it's going to be 6 years to grab all you can, knowing that you won't return. That's the mentality that the average Nigerian has concerning politicians. And the reason that this is even a conversation about term limits is because the institutions that should checkmate these leaders in Nigeria have seemingly all failed. You can't checkmate the president, neither can you checkmate state governors. The National Assembly and state houses of assembly, including the judiciary also, all seem to be dormant nationwide. You would almost never hear that the National Assembly or State House of Assembly rejected any proposal by the executive or investigated their excesses. They really just exist barely in representation of the people. Term durations are worthless if institutions are weak, and that is the key message. And so even if you give a clueless leader 10 years in office, he will fail for 11. Now, on the flip side, what Nigerians actually want is an electoral system that they can trust. They don't care about how many terms, but they want an improvement in the quality of candidates that they have to choose from. 4 or 8 years doesn't matter. An election where their votes actually count. Nigerians want 24 hours electricity, better infrastructure, affordable education, healthcare, security, affordable petrol. A country where retirees can actually live a full life on their pensions. Nigerians want institutions that actually fight corruption, a criminal justice system that they can trust, and a few other things. Nobody is thinking about term durations for our leaders. If you fix these institutions and remind the different arms of government what their responsibilities are, then we are very likely to see a more fruitful 4-year term each time a leader is elected. Again, a clueless leader with weak arms of government and weak institutions, if you give that clueless leader 10 years in office, he will fail for 11. Good morning, Nigerians.
Loyalists of Simon Ekpa, a separatist leader recently arrested in Finland on terrorism-related charges, have vowed to continue the Monday sit-at-home protest in southeast Nigeria. Ngozi Orabueze, identifying as Chief of Staff of the self-declared Biafra Republic government in exile, reaffirmed the action as a voluntary agreement by all Biafrans and praised the Biafra Defense Forces for their resistance against Nigerian security forces. Orabueze also announced plans for a Biafra independence redeclaration in Finland on the 2nd of December, while accusing the Nigerian government of human rights violation.
Meanwhile, the Enugu state government has offered to provide evidence of atrocities allegedly perpetrated in southeast Nigeria by the pro-Biafra agitator Simon Ekpa. The Secretary to the State Government, Chidebere Onya, said in a statement that the arrest was in line with the demands of Governor Peter Omba's led administration to finish authorities. And joining us is public affairs analyst and historian, Director General also of the Heritage Center, Abuja, Mr. Kach Ononuju. Good morning, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me today.
All right, pretty interesting development, and also interesting reaction from the Peter Omba government in Enugu State. I did share a story last week that I, was aware on the day that the group was proscribed in Enugu State. Nnamdi Kanu and others were meant to meet with the Enugu State government. He missed out on that meeting, and a couple of hours later, the news came that the group had been proscribed. So what are your reactions, first of all, to his arrest by the Finnish government, and then to, and of course, the Enugu State government's reaction as well?
Well, I will tell you, Enugu State government wouldn't go far because Simon Ekpa, for me, is seen as an agent of the Nigerian government. What he does is skit. There are up to 38 different Biafran organizations, and quite a lot of them, if not all of them, are just proxies for the Nigerian state. Simon Ekpa, all he does are skits. Those skits provide the alibi for which the Nigerian government sustains its occupation of Eastern Nigeria. You can see Simon Ekpa, yes, is the one you see on social media, but the people on the ground, the checkpoints, Nigerian governments, the places you see, as I'm talking to you right now, they're having problem demobilizing the boys they put together under Pichi for the unknown government operations. They're not demobilized because the present government doesn't want to be part of it. This was a Buhari, Pichi, an arrangement, and they were not demobilized before Pichi was sacked. And this is a problem. So all these boys you call Ekpa and the rest of them that make noise and make skits, as pro-Biafra groups, they are simple vuvuzelas for the Buhari administration, for the Nigerian government, and nobody sees them doing any good for the Igbo. They make skits, the Nigerian government acts because they don't have the capability to stay on the ground to do on the unknown government sting operation. So they provide the enabling narratives for government local actions.
Are you saying, I mean, I need to understand what you're saying. Are you saying that the unknown gunmen, the violence in the southeast, those who have been enforcing the sit-at-home order, the violence that occurred in Anambra State about a week ago, where, a few people were murdered, are you saying all of this, is all seemingly orchestrated by the Nigerian government from the Buhari administration till now?
Primarily, the bulk of it, I have said severally since on television, is the Nigerian government. These boys like Ekpa and the rest of them, glittered all over the place, they are skit makers. What they do is they make skits pretending to be who they are not. They are not on the ground. They can perpetrate the violence. What Abacha told you is true. If the violence sustains for more than 72 hours, the government is involved in it. Until today, no prosecutions. It's a government that owns the people on the checkpoints. It's a government that owns the vicinity where you see these things occur. Today, as I'm talking to you, they have problem about demobilization because Bichi left his boys who was working with through Asari Dokubo. Today, they are littered, they are not demobilized. And the current administration and government, and that's one thing I thank Tinubu for. Tinubu walked away from the unknown government sting operation. But you see, them not being demobilized and them just lying everywhere is a problem. So people like you see Ekpa, they are of no good to the Igbo. Neither are they good for whoever thinks is using them to propagate this kind of skits. It is the Nigerian government that's on the ground. No one else. No one else.
Do you share the same? Do you share the same thoughts?
Violence with the Nigerian state.
Do you share the same thought process when Nnamdi Kanu is brought into the conversation? Because everyone can see that Ekpa, of course, continued the journey. You know, he started the journey with his Radio Biafra that was started by Nnamdi Kanu. So do you also think that Nnamdi Kanu is playing a script written by the government?
Where did Nnamdi Kanu start from? After Wazirike was given a conditional release. Then Nnamdi came up. And then somewhere along the line, there were disagreements. Nnamdi came into the country to confront them. And since then, it's gone bad. Let me give you an instance. When the United States set up Bin Laden and co., it's always when they go over the top that they start fighting the same Americans. Israel at the time was funding Hamas, thinking it will have the capacity to break the Palestinian opposition. What happened? Hamas went over the top. Today, the pro-Biafran boys that Buhari used to stage his caterpillar dance, python dance, unknown government and all have gone off. And some of the boys are not being looked after. As I'm talking to you, some will just be taken out because most of them were harvested from the prisons. We had 13 different prison breaks under Buhari. And today, because that program was not demobilized, it was not properly winded up.
Because we're trying to get out as much information as we can, Mr. Catch, Mr. Ononuju, can we say we categorically have data, evidence to substantiate a number of these claims, or are we, just...
Yes. We have had data right from the day it started. I was in the East. I came to warn leaders about what I heard from London about Buhari administration telling the English government to hold on and don't go on with the asylum program it wanted to give to those who oppose Buhari administration. That it will provide evidence. And that was how Buhari started on this cascade of actions to manufacture evidence to say Igbos were in terrorism. It's not true. Only the state could have staged those sting operations you called unknown gunmen. Those were sting operations. Today, thanks to the Tinubu administration, they are over. But I don't think the combatants have been demobilized because Bichi was sacked and then everything just got overhang. But I thank the Tinubu administration for stopping the unknown government sting operation, or at least for funding it. And I want to urge governors like Uzodinma and co. Don't help anybody who comes to you. Don't listen to them. Let them go to Bichi and resolve. Since you never ever started this operation, you don't know anything about it, don't be involved in the demobilization. Tinubu should also let them rot. Let them go home. If not, the government should take them out. We need peace. We need peace in this country. The government and its laxity is responsible for insecurity across the country. Today, Tinubu is fighting the Fulani militiamen, and what's going on? You're still in the know. We've lost the chief of army staff. We need a chief of army staff that will be protected so that he can fight those who remove Nigerians from their ancestral lands and put foreigners on such lands.
Who will protect this chief of army staff?
To go stay in IDP camps.
Mr. Ononuju, who will protect the chief of army staff? Who will do the protecting?
Listen, he has to protect himself. He should understand that when he's brought in to work with a cartel, they were comfortable with Buhari. There are things he does that they may not be very happy with. He has to be careful. He has to be careful. You do not remove hegemony just like that through elections. No. Hegemonies have had their cartel members in place in different institutions of state. When you come in, you have to be careful so that they don't remove you.
All right, Catch and Ononuju, we have to go now. Thank you so much for your time with us this morning and for sharing your thoughts regarding this story.
Really interesting.
I
hope that we can also extend the conversation. You know, if we had more time, we definitely would love to dig deeper.
No. Let's talk.
We're out of time, Mr. Ononuju. Unfortunately,
we can't stop.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're out of time. So the producers will reach out to you so we can reschedule another date so we can have an extended conversation about this. But of course, very interesting perspective you brought in. I'm sure a lot of people will like your perspective on this. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
All right. Well, very, very interesting way to end the show on a Monday. Thanks to our viewers and, of course, to our guests for joining us. We're going to be back here again tomorrow morning. I am Osao Gie Ogbola.
And I am Olive Emodi. Have a lovely day.